Hello everyone and welcome to Merlin Reviews. Today, this requested video will be discussing the famous manga series, Monster. Monster was written and illustrated by Naoki Urasawa. It was published between 1994 and 2001. The story revolves around Kenzo Tenma, a Japanese surgeon who is living in Germany and whose life enters turmoil after getting himself involved with Johann Liebert, one of his former patients who is eventually revealed to be a dangerous psychopathic murderer. The manga was later adapted by Madhouse into a 74-episode anime series. Monster has been critically acclaimed, and the manga won several awards, and its anime adaptation has been very faithful and well received as well. Let's go over the plot. Dr. Kenzo Tenma is a young Japanese doctor, as stated earlier, working at Eisler Memorial Hospital in Dusseldorf in 1986. An accomplished brain surgeon, he seems to have everything going for him. Soon to be promoted, he has the favor of the hospital's director, Udo Heinemann, and Heinemann's daughter, Eva, is his fiancée. However, Tenma is increasingly dissatisfied with the political bias of the hospital in treating its patients, and seizes the chance to change things after a massacre brings the fraternal twins Johann and Anna Liebert into the hospital. Tenma, going by his ethics as a doctor, decides to operate on Johann instead of the mayor of Dusseldorf, who arrives a little bit later. Johann is saved, but the mayor dies. Therefore, Tenma loses his social standing and his fiancée as a result of this, but comforts himself by believing that he did the right thing. However, Dr. Heinemann and the other doctors in Tenma's way are mysteriously murdered, and both children disappear from the hospital soon afterwards. The police suspect Tenma since he benefits from the unfortunate turn of events. However, they have no real evidence and can only question him. Nearly a decade later, Tenma is now the chief of surgery at his hospital. A patient of his, being questioned in connection with the murder of several middle-aged couples across Germany, is murdered right before his eyes, and the killer is revealed to be none other than Johann Liebert, the child who had disappeared so many years earlier. Tenma tells all the police, but they find no real trace of anyone named Johann Liebert, and Tenma soon becomes the lead suspect. Johann also reveals he had in fact murdered Tenma's superiors years before as a payment for saving his life. Distraught that what he believed to be doing was the right thing, by saving Johann as a child had actually led to so much misery, Tenma begins to track down Johann, wanting to hunt down the monster as atonement for his fatal mistake. Tenma's hunt for Johann brings him face to face with the ugliest, most unpleasant underbelly of the world. Within politics all the way to organized crime, from serial killers, even to seemingly innocent orphans, as a massive showcase of how man can turn himself into a force for evil, and how easy it is to destroy the fragile balance that is life, and how frightening the unknown can truly be. Tenma must piece together the few hints he can find to catch Johann, for it is determined that one man's struggle against something much greater, something that must have designed to have been so much greater than himself. But Tenma is not alone in his hunt. Even as Johann leaves a destruction in his wake, Tenma is closing in throughout the whole series, with each chapter leading to the question that Tenma asks himself. Knowing what he knows, can he still claim to know what the monster truly is? Can he ever win in his struggle against this evil of near legendary mythical proportions? The characters. We mentioned Tenma. Tenma is the main protagonist of the series. Tenma is basically a workaholic who prioritizes his patients and their well-being more than anything else. Although he's a highly skilled neurosurgeon, he confesses to Inspector Lunge later that during his surgery he's often very worried about making mistakes. Tenma is very obsessed with saving as many lives as possible. Johann enjoys toying with this mindset, creating several massacres, really just to challenge Tenma to stop him. His kindness is very prevalent throughout the whole series, which is very much in contrast to Johann's rather cold and detached nature, and he sometimes ponders about the morality of his actions. When he is worried, he often neglects his own self-care, foregoing food or even sleep. Other than that, though, he's overall a very optimistic individual, and he tries his very best to see the best in others, giving words of encouragement to the people around him as much as he can. When Lunge enters Tenma's psyche, he discovers that Tenma doesn't fit in either with Japanese or German society. Despite this, Tenma is not really that unsociable, seeming to be able to enjoy being around others most of the time. However, he does prefer to work alone in his quest, though he can work in a team if it's necessary. Tenma's motto is that all lives are basically equal, and it's the reason why he betrayed the director so many years ago, choosing to save the life of a young child rather than a man based on his social status. This idea isn't really just a work ethic, as much as it is Tenma's philosophy and his basic principles. It's the primary reason why he struggles so much with the idea of killing Johann. For example, Tenma becomes racked with guilt over shooting an individual in spite of the apparent necessity of his actions, believing that he had killed that man, and he expresses so much remorse over his seeming death that he feels himself unworthy of even being called a doctor. There are so many points in the series like this where Tenma is forced to question his own beliefs. Johann Liebert serves as the main antagonist or monster of the series, and serves to test Tenma's morality and view of the world. Most of his past is held as a mystery, with Tenma uncovering bits and pieces as he learns of all the people who had been affected by Johann in some way or another. typically for the worse. Anna is Johan's twin sister. Anna would reject her brother's terrible nature and would act as one of Tenma's closest allies in his fight to stop Johan's ultimate plan. And then there's Lunge, a methodical and driven detective who is pursuing Tenma, believing he is guilty of the murders at first, but later suspecting more of a conspiracy. The primary themes of Monster are the idea of evil itself and how far boundaries should be crossed to stop it. Many examples of the worst of humanity are shown in this series, and Johan is just the purest example of this. The manga is dark and bleak in its outlook, with the only real shining hope being Tenma and the few people who seem genuinely good that he meets. The comic does take its time at some points, but is rarely boring, with enough twists and turns to keep you interested for the next volume. The artwork is rather realistic and detailed, complementing the setting of the post-Cold War Europe, a time and place where the struggle for power and the morality of that struggle often came into question. The characters are also well-rounded and seem rather realistic, even though the villains sometimes border on cartoony at points. Johan himself seems to breathe such a tremendous atmosphere of true horror, so much so that even if he isn't mentioned, you can almost always feel his presence. The plot slowly unveils with a mystery, and is exceptional in its execution. The only real negative I found during my experience was the ending. Now the ending isn't really bad, mind you, it's just okay. After such a fantastic build-up, it leaves you with more of an open-ended conclusion than a completely satisfying one. Though to be fair, with that level of build-up with Johan as an almost supernatural force, it would probably become so fantastical in comparison to the rest of the comic, which really would have jarred the tone. It probably could have been grander and had a more solid conclusion, but it's a satisfactory ending enough. Along with the ending, the final conclusion of the conflict between Johan and Tenma honestly seems just a bit too safe. Overall though, it's one of the best manga I've ever read and would happily suggest it to any comic book fan. It's one of the best psychological thrillers in any medium, and I leave it with an A. Alright guys, that was my review of Monster. Let me know your thoughts below, and like, share, and subscribe if you have not already. Alright my friends, stay magical.